That's a life of a fisherman you wouldn't understand. Something you can't feel on dry land. Gotta get your arms way up in a cage and set the hook on smallmouth bass, and then you'll understand. Gotta get your hands on a Shimano reel and a G-Loomis trying to bet you like what you feel. Step on the deck, give it a whirl. Hello, welcome to my world.
What's going on, all you Facebook Live and YouTube Live fishing freaks? Welcome to this episode of On Another Line Live. This week, we're going to be talking about line. Fishing line, that is, on another line. Which to use, why, pros and cons of 3 different types. We're going to be talking about monofilament. We're going to be talking about fluorocarbon. We're also going to be talking about braided line. Now, there are some copolymers and stuff that we're just going to kind of omit because they're kind of weird depending on how they're made and how they're, the molecular structure of them. So we're not going to go super, super crazy into that. But we're going to talk about 3 different types of line today, when and why I use each one of them. So with that being said, guys, thank you for joining this episode of On Another Line Live. I will be by myself this evening. JR has the fam at Disney World. Matter of fact, I have part of his family here. I have his dog Ace. You might hear him bouncing around here. Sounds like a cowbell. But we're going to talk about line in just a second. But without further ado, again, this episode is brought to you by Hannah Sublett, insurance broker, protecting your health, securing your future. Give her a call at 740-456-7944 for all your health and life insurance needs. She is located conveniently in Greenup, Kentucky, and she will help you get you some, health and life insurance. I don't know if you heard Misty in the other room, but she's at Disney also. So apparently this is the time to be at Disney. I've never been, and I can't say that I would enjoy it. Don't have kids, obviously, so that's probably why I've never been there. Who knows? We might go. But again, we're talking today different types of fishing line, when to use, what, and where. And again, take this for what it's worth. I am no professional fisherman. I just like to fish, and I like to bring some of the knowledge that I've learned along the way to you folks out there. And today, we are going to be talking about 3 different types of lines. We're going to be talking about monofilament, which is going to be the old school. We're talking like grandpa's fishing line. And then we're going to go into fluorocarbon, and then we're going to talk about braided fishing line. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of each, when I think is the best time to use them, and maybe give you some tips and tricks that may help you out in the long run. With fishing line, guys, there is a huge amount of data out there. There is so many different types of fishing lines out there that is absolutely crazy to think about. For example, you go over to Border Sporting Goods and you walk down their line aisle, and there's like 200 what seems like spools of line there. Different pound tests, different types of lines, whether that be PE, polyethylene, braid, or whether it be fluorocarbon or monofilament. But we're going to kind of talk about a little bit about both today, and if that interests you, stick around. We're going to try to make that happen today. Larry Slack, what's up, buddy? Thanks for joining. Always good to see your name there. So the biggest deal is here, and again, this is probably a review for a lot of you guys out there. A lot of you guys are better at fishing than I am, so you're probably going to be like, yeah, I'm probably not going to join tonight, but it's going to be one of those things where you probably will learn something, before the day's over, I hope. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is going to be monofilament, and monofilament is actually an old school line. This is what we all used to start fishing with. This is what comes on your standard Zebco 33. This is what comes on a lot of your, lower end reels and rods that are pre-spooled. The biggest thing is that it's cheap and it works. Now, the thing about it is it does have some pros and cons we'll get into in just a second. But monofilament, which is also often called mono, M-O-N-O, fishing line, is basically made from a single strand of nylon or a blend of polymers. Now, that's where I'm talking about where you have copolymers. Like, for example, before I started fishing Sunline, I was fishing Stren Fluorocast, which is a fluorocarbon-coated monofilament. And I'll explain to you why I don't fish that anymore, and I'll explain to you why Sunline has my business as well as Power Pro, because I have had some bad luck in the past, but it wasn't due to the stren line. So I don't want to throw that out there. And I'll tell you that story in just a second. But one of the things about monofilament that you're going to dive into right off the rip is that it has the most stretch out of any of these three lines we're going to talk about today. Again, it has a lot more stretch just for the fact that it's made from nylon. Nylon stretches. If it didn't stretch, if it was just like one single, strand of nylon without any stretchiness, it would be very brittle and break very easily. And that's kind of one of the downfalls of the fluorocarbon, which we'll get into in just a second. It allows for better shock absorption when you're fishing. Now, why would you need shock absorption? Let's talk about some of the areas that you may need. First and foremost, if you're throwing a crankbait or you're throwing some sort of bait that's around timber or around things that you're going to get stuck on a lot of times, the fluorocarbon, or I'm sorry, the mono will give you a little bit of shock absorption to an extent. In my opinion, I don't fish any fluorocarbon at all. And just for the simple fact is I'm so used to the fluorocarbon not having any stretch to it hardly. And there are different types of fluorocarbons we'll talk about in just a second that are specifically designed for technique specific things. But most of the time, a regular fluorocarbon is not going to have a ton of stretch. It's not going to be as, spongy as fluorocarbon. I'm sorry, monofilament. I keep saying fluoro. But one of the pros that monofilament has is that you have it floats. Justin, you are not wrong about that. I think they both have downfalls, and you're right. So monofilament floats more than fluorocarbon, but eventually will still sink slowly. If you just throw mono out there to lay on top of the water, but it eventually will sink. It's not a floating line. They do make floating lines. They also do make sinking lines now, and we'll dive into that in just a second. The great thing about monofilament is that it's available in a wide variety of colors. Now, this could be clear, obviously. You could be looking at green. I've seen blue. I've seen, there are some that actually glow under black lights. They're designed to, basically match different water conditions. Personally, I only fish clear normally, but the clear blue is great if you're night fishing. It shows up under a black light very well. And that's another pro for monofilament. You get it almost looks like a glow stick coming off your rod if you're night fishing. I don't night fish hardly at all. Matter of fact, I've night fished like twice in my life, and one of those with Jared Sloan last year before last at Yatesville in a night tournament that we ended up winning. But that was the only time, and it doesn't. For one thing, it just doesn't interest me to night fish. Now, I think I am going to this year go out to Greenbow in the night and try to catch a warm water giant out there in the wintertime. I'm sorry, in the summertime, but that would be the only time that I do it. My boat's not set up for it, and I just don't fish that much at night. So that is a pro, but it doesn't really do that much for me. One of the biggest things about monofilament is that it tends to have higher memory in the line. What that means is it retains loops and coils from being on the spool of your reel. And also, if you have something in a spool, as far as a line spool goes, if it's over 8-10 months old, it's going to have that line memory in it. Now, there are certain things that you can do to get some of that out. I've seen some pros out there actually boil their fishing line. I personally am not into that. I feel like that would be more stress on it than anything else. Yeah, man, that's what I'm hearing. It's really tough out there during the day, so maybe I can go out there and catch one. It's a giant place, and I will tell you, man, I've got so much good feedback on that Greenbow series. It's unbelievable. Hold up. First and foremost, I forgot one thing here, and I'm going to grab my YouTube here. I'm going to figure this dude's name out. So yesterday, I met a fellow YouTuber at Border Sporting Goods. Let me pull up my notes here. Maybe. Just saw it. I just saw it. I think I'm going to check it out here. FSM Outdoors. Let me make sure this is true, because I want you to go out and check him out. Man, I tell you what, he's a young kid, buddy of mine, Luke McCoy's son. Yes, FSM Outdoors. He had 110 subscribers yesterday when I subscribed. Really cool kid. First time I ever met him. But again, F is in Frog, S is in Sam, M is in Michael, Outdoors. FSM Outdoors. He's actually got 132 subscribers now, so he's gained 12 since yesterday, which is awesome. But it is out there. I appreciate it if you guys would go check it out. Again, it's called FSM Outdoors. Right now, it doesn't have a lot of stuff about fishing on there. He just has a lot of stuff about, like, I don't know, I wouldn't call it homesteading, but he's checking out his chickens. And again, we're talking about a young kid here. I don't know exactly how old Fisher is, but I'm guessing he's probably 7, 8 years old, maybe 9. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. So, but he's, I've been watching through his videos. He's trying to get a following, and he's going to do more fishing videos with his dad, Luke, throughout this summer. So if you enjoy stuff like that, go check him out, FSM Outdoors. So without further ado, again, let's talk about some of the pros of monofilament. The pros are that it's affordable and widely available. You can buy this stuff in different colors, different sizes, different brands, different technique-specific stuff. Like I think it's Strin makes the big game, which is a popular monofilament for pay lake fishermen and cat fishermen in our area, just for the simple fact that it's very cheap. You can buy like 1,200 yard spools of this stuff for like $8 or $10. Now, again, with that being said, this is the old school fishing line. Now, I'm not saying that you still can't be using this. I don't use it, but some people do. It's really good for top water because it doesn't sink. Really good for shock absorption, like throwing a crankbait or throwing like a chatterbait or something like that. I wouldn't throw anything like a jerk bait or something like that. You're not going to get as much action with the fluoro or the mono because it's going to be stretching like a rubber band. And the more line you have out in the cast, the more stretchy you're going to feel. If you throw like a 1/2 ounce jig on monofilament and you set the hook on a fish, it's going to feel like you're setting the hook on what seems like a bungee cord. And that's why I don't fish it that much, just for the simple fact is I hate that feeling. Like, I want to feel connected to my bait, and I do that with braid and fluorocarbon. Now, another thing is that it's easy to tie knots with, and it has good knot strength for what it is. Again, nylon cinches down on itself well. Takes a lot to burn it up. Like, for example, fluorocarbon, you need to make sure you're wetting the line very well before you pull knots tight. I'm not saying that you don't have to do that with mono, but it's more forgiving than fluorocarbon. It does have more stretch, allowing you to, not have to have it as wet, the knots as wet when you're tying it. Does have moderate stretch, which again, one of the things that it can do is prevent hooks from pulling out of fish because, again, of the shock absorbing technology that's kind of there. It's not really a technology, but it's kind of there. And, it's kind of good that it's there. Works well with topwater lures because it's of the buoyancy factor. It allows it to float. It allows your topwater bait to stay on top of the water longer. However, as I mentioned before, you cast out with monofilament, eventually it will sink. It does float longer than fluorocarbon. Some of the cons of monofilament you're going to be talking about is that it's more susceptible to UV damage and water absorption. Now, water absorption is something that I'd never thought of until I started diving into which fishing line was best for me, is the fact that the monofilament is more porous than fluorocarbon, and it causes water to be absorbed into the water or into the line over time, and it causes weakening of the line over time. So both the UV damage and the water absorption makes it less, more susceptible for breakage down the line because you're going to have to worry about more things harming your line as you go on. And as Justin Shearer mentioned earlier, fluoro frays pretty bad, and that's true. We'll talk about that in just a second. But with this, you also have to think about UV damage. So if you are like me and have like 15 rods on the boat deck at one given time, probably not a great idea if you have a ton of monofilament spooled up on your rods, because basically if you're not using those rods, it's just going to weaken it due to the sun beating down on it. And another thing that it does, it actually kind of dries the line out and makes the line memory worse, in my opinion. Again, another con of monofilament is that higher stretch that's built into the line by default can reduce sensitivity depending on what line you're using, what rod and reel you're using, and what you're fishing, obviously. It can be harder to detect subtle bites that are bottom contact. Now, let's face it, if you're throwing topwater, you're throwing a crankbait, or you're throwing a jerkbait or a chatterbait or something like that, most of those bites are going to be on the cast and when you're reeling. And most of the time, you just know. And Jared and I were talking about it the other day when we were fishing that spring banger tournament, that there's just something about having a fish eat a spinnerbait or a crankbait, or I'm sorry, spinnerbait or a chatterbait. It's just weird. Sometimes, most of the time, it just, you can feel the blades moving and then just not. It just slack lines those things. They absolutely eat it really well. So that's really good there. I love that. I love that bite for sure. And one of the things that the last con that I really have come up with is that there's probably more. Again, this is my unprofessional opinion here, is that it's more visible in water compared to fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon, in my opinion, from the studies and stuff that I've seen, is more visible to fish in the water, especially in super clear, gin clear water. You can just see it. It actually transfers light, in my opinion, sunlight down the line, almost like a glow stick. Not that bad, obviously, but it does have a highlighted effect of it. It almost, to me, feels like, it looks like a fiber optic cable. And as far as I know, fiber optic used to be glass. Now I think they have switched to a lot of that being nylon. So it does make sense why that happens, because, that's just the properties of what you have there. Some best uses for monofilament: topwater lures, great for poppers, walk the dog style bait, something like a spook or a fluke if you're throwing something that is, kind of subsurface. Probably would refrain from throwing a buzz bait on this thing, because I like to throw a buzz bait around timber and around things. So I want something with a little bit more forgiveness as far as setting the hook. So I normally throw topwater baits on braid, and I'll explain that why in just a second. You are 100% right there. Only line available for, in the 1980s, which is great. And that's why I think it's tried and true. Like I said, I called it at the beginning of the show, your grandpa's fishing line, but it's true to an extent, but it still has its uses today, obviously. Another one of the best uses is that it's a beginner-friendly fishing line. Just exactly what ERK there was talking about. Everybody starts out with monofilament because it's cheap. It's easy to tie. It works well. You can use it pretty much for any technique. It's not going to be as good for certain techniques, but let's face it, we're all out here and we're kind of bougie about what we're fishing. So it's a little different. If you're just wanting to go out and catch some fish, man, monofilament is hard to beat. Another thing that mono actually brings into effect is if people are trolling for like walleye and things like that. But the most of the people that troll that I know is going to be, they usually use braided line, because they can tell how far the bait is going to dive each and every time based on how much line they have out. And with monofilament, that stretch causes that, those depths to be off a little bit. But the deal is with the mono trolling that, if a fish hits it, the lure or whatever, you have that built-in shock absorption from the monofilament. And again, a lot of people like using mono for live bait fishing, and I would probably think the best case scenario would be fishing around sparse cover. You're not going to be, we're talking about open water, we're talking about limited abrasion risk, we're talking about a lot of different things that doesn't really fit in well with the monofilament because of its stretchiness and all that stuff. What is up, Tyler Williams? Hope you guys are excited. Speaking of which, we have Casting for Kids coming up, not this weekend coming, but the weekend after that. 160 boat tournament, Yatesville. We're going to try to get Chris Ferguson on next week so we can get the hype up about that. I would love to tell you that you guys can get into that, but you cannot. If you haven't got into it right now, you cannot get into it. There's no more open spots. It's been sold out. It's been booked up for years as far as I know. But there is one at Douglas Lake, and there's also one that is going to be, if you fish the Douglas event and you make the top 100, you can then fish the Classic, which I think is $100,000 payout, I believe. I could be wrong, but it's a huge deal. Going to be down in Chickamauga coming up soon. So with that being said, let's jump over into fluorocarbon fishing line. And this is where, so the next two lines, fluorocarbon and braid, is where 100% of my rods in my boat fall. I don't have a single. I take this back. I like to. You talk about your grandpa's fishing rods. I have one of my dad's walleye rods in my boat right now, just because I haven't done anything with it yet. I have a G Loomis walleye rod and a Shimano. I think it's a Stratic. I'll have to see, but it has fluoro or has mono loaded on it. But everything else I got straight fluorocarbon, straight braid. So the characteristics of a fluorocarbon line is that it's made from a dense polyvinylidene. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Polyvinylidene, I think, fluoride, PVDF material. Nearly invisible underwater. Definitely a pro due to its light refracting properties. It doesn't absorb light and it doesn't transfer light. It actually bounces light off from it. And actually, doesn't absorb light, but it basically becomes one with the light, if you will. Very low stretch compared to fluorocarbon. I'm sorry, monofilament. If I get this right, it'd be awesome. Has very low stretch compared to monofilament. It feels a lot more brittle, and sometimes it is, depending on what you're looking at. But it does improve sensitivity by more than double, in my opinion, if you're using straight fluorocarbon. Has low stretch. Again, that's one of the big things. Sinks faster than mono. Not going to be very well suited for your topwater baits because it sinks almost instantaneously. Hey, Nate, what's up, buddy? Yeah, man. So that's the deal. Like, everybody has their opinions, and that's the greatest thing about fishing, man. And it's so awesome that you can have. I love getting together with you guys on Tuesdays because we all have basically the same idea about fishing. We just like to go out and fish. But man, over the last 6 months of finally getting I'm not even that big on YouTube. I got 6,000 subscribers. I had a video the other day get 350,000 views. It was me catching a trout. I have come to determine that the fishing industry as a whole is a cesspool of just a bunch of inconsiderate, like, miserable, and I apologize for my words here, but pricks. It's like, and there's nobody in the fishing industry that can be like proud of somebody else. Like, I caught that trout, just posted it on there, 350,000 views, and about a half of the comments of the 5,000 comments that are on this video was telling me that I set the hook too hard. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't really care what they think, but it's funny. But it's weird. It's like, I saw a video today. It was crazy about how they were talking about, how the fishing industry has changed. And it has. It's so crazy. Again, sinks faster than mono, making it ideal for certain presentations. Going to be like finesse techniques. I throw, again, 100% fluorocarbon pretty much if it's not braid. It is more abrasion resistant than mono, but as somebody mentioned earlier, it does fray pretty bad. So you need to make sure you're keeping an eye on your line, especially around your knots. If you're going braid to fluorocarbon or straight fluorocarbon and you have it into, if you're throwing a crankbait or something like that on a fluorocarbon line, you're probably going to make sure that you have, you can actually see it. It'll actually fray off and have like curls on it, which is crazy. P-Line CX. So this is a copolymer. Nice. I like that. Low stretch, invisible, way stronger than the 4 I've used. That's awesome. I'll have to check some of that stuff out. Yep, Worm, I'm with you on that. I miss a lot of fish because I throw straight braid on the top water, and I have absolutely slackline the heck out of rods. So again, abrasion resistant. But the thing about it is it's stiffer than monofilament, which can make knot tying more difficult. It's absolutely imperative that you make sure you're wetting the line either with lake water or saliva when you're cinching any kind of knot down, whether that be, something like a uni knot, or maybe you're tying something like a Palomar knot or a Stren knot, whatever. You must, and it is imperative for you to get that line wet when you're cinching that knot down, because if not, it creates friction and burns the line almost in two. When you cast the line or cast the lure, you have a chance to breaking it off. You set the hook on a fish, same deal. There's just a lot of stuff there. So make sure if you're using fluorocarbon, make sure you're getting it wet when you cinch those knots down. Some of the pros that are available for monofilament is fluorocarbon. I'll get it right eventually. Fluorocarbon is that it has excellent invisibility underwater. Again, it makes it really ideal for finicky fish, high pressured areas, places where it's really super gin clear. There's a lot of stuff that can go on there. Again, abrasion resistance is another pro, but again, it's ideal for fishing around like rocks, logs, stumps, sharp structures. But again, does fray. But in my opinion, it's less susceptible to those types of abrasion causing environments than monofilament. Low stretch, causing enhanced sensitivity for me. I feel like it just, you could feel the bites a lot better. And when tungsten came out, I didn't drink the Kool-Aid about tungsten. I was like, this is back when it was super expensive. It was like $8 for one freaking worm weight. And I'm like, there is no way I'm paying $8 for a worm weight when I lose 20 of them a day. But now that tungsten has come down and it's a little more affordable, I believe that tungsten absolutely paired with fluorocarbon gives you more sensitivity than you can get with lead and fluorocarbon, or especially lead and monofilament. It's more dense than mono, which then causes it to sink, works better for deep water applications. And again, now we're going to talk about braid in just a second, and they're making braids now that are sinking braids. They've always made trolling braids, which are like lead core. I'm not talking about like sinking. These actually are, like Berkeley just come out with one called Forward, and let's face it, that's for a forward-facing sonar fanatic. That it's the line sinks faster, so you can get your sonar minnow down to those fish quicker and get more bites. Now I believe, though, one of the things that I didn't think about when I was going into fishing for the first time, especially fishing with fluorocarbon, is that fluorocarbon sometimes is a little bit more thin in diameter than monofilament, which causes your baits to run deeper or more shallow, depending on what bait or what line that bait is designed for. For example, if you look on the back of like KVD 1.5, it'll show that it dives like 3 to 5 feet. Well, I'm almost 100% certain that all of those depths are based on you throwing monofilament. Now, fluorocarbon will actually cause baits to dive deeper than normally set, than they're like rated for, just for the simple fact that they're thinner and they have less drag in the water, so they allow that bait to go deeper. Now, again, this is all, relevant, and it's all talking about, it's kind of up in the air about how far you're casting. If you throw like a 10-yard cast as opposed to a 30-yard cast, you're going to get deeper than anything else. Obviously, it's all about the angle of the dive. But your baits are going to actually dive a little bit deeper than they're rated for on the package. Like, for example, one of the ones that I just realized recently is that I throw pretty much almost across the board 12-pound Sunline FC Sniper. And I do that just for the simple fact I buy it in bulk. I buy it from Borders over in Ashland. Brad can get you pretty much anything you want over there. But I had him order me 2 or 3 1,200-yard spools of Sunline FC Sniper. I got 2 1,200-yard spools of FC Sniper in 12-pound test and a 1,200-yard spool in 16-pound test. That's basically what I use across the board on all of my rods. But I was throwing the new Shimano Zoom Verno 95 SP jerkbait over the winter, and with forward-facing sonar, that's one of the things that I think is a major pro for forward-facing sonar from me learning how to fish more efficiently. I could see that my bait, according to the package from Shimano, this thing only is supposed to dive from like 3 to 4 feet. And I was getting down to 7-8 foot range with this bait, I think mainly because of the fluorocarbon that I was using and not monofilament. Again, it sinks, does have less water drag in there, so it does allow you to fish a little deeper. What's up, Tennessee Bassmaster? Glad you have you back, man. Man, so there is nothing wrong with that. And again, I am not a purist. I fish Shimano G Loomis Power Pro Sunline. I fish this stuff because of stuff that I love to fish, and I've been very, very lucky that I have a partnership with a lot of these companies. But I'm not a purist, man. You get out there and fish. I don't care if you're catching them on a Zipco 33 with 10-pound strand that was on the rod. It's fine. It's all about getting out. And you're right, man. It's very good to use with jerk baits for sure. Now, let's talk about some of the cons of the fluorocarbon. It's more expensive than monofilament by like 10 times, it seems like. If you look at a 100, it's like a 220 yard spool of Sunline FC Sniper is like $28. You could buy enough monofilament to string up everything that you have in your boat 3 times over for $30 probably if you had everything on the same pound test. You buy like a 3,600 yard spool of Stren mono for like $20. And it's a lot more expensive. Now, do I think that it has a lot more benefits than mono? I do. And I also think that you can get a lot more years out of fluorocarbon than you can monofilament, because I've proven that. Caleb James last week called me out on it in the store there at Borders because I bought all that line. He's like, man, why do you need all that line for? I was like, well, I fish a lot. I've changed my line a lot. He's like, well, I saw some of your videos where you talk about having fluorocarbon on your line or on your rod for multiple years in a row, which is absolutely true. Matter of fact, I got one rod in my boat right now that I'm just leaving fluorocarbon on just to see how long it will last. This stuff looks like a freaking slinky when you cast it. It's Sunline FC Sniper, but I'm going to guess on a low number, it's 5 years old, at least 5 years old. I want to see how long it takes to get brittle. And I don't do anything stupid with it. I don't fish with it if I'm fishing a tournament, but it's just a bottom contact bait that I have, a Texas rig tied on, and I throw it when I'm out pre-fishing or practicing or just fun fishing. And I throw it every time I'm out just to see eventually that it's going to break and give me some feedback. Hey, this is good for X amount. Well, I do know from talking to Brad at Borders, who had reached out to the people, had talked to the people at Sunline actually when he bought this stuff for me, that it has a shelf life of 5 years. So if it's not being out in the sun or whatever, it's just on a spool, should be good for 5 years. So that's why I bought so much line. It's not going to go bad. I don't think it's going to be in my garage, which is, it's climate controlled, no sun in there. So I think that's it. Hey Nate, I'll have to look, but I'm thinking my gain is like 78-ish, I think. I need to do a video about what I have because, man, I have some of the clearest pictures ever for me to not know anything about it. But I hate making forward facing sonar videos because people just absolutely hate it. And I get it, but if you're not fishing, if you're not using it in tournaments and you're allowed to use it, you're going to get freaking smoked usually. Maybe not this time of year, but usually. Rated bait yesterday and was talking about lines they use and don't use. That's cool. I have to check that out, Michael. So I don't have personal experience with it, Jamie. I will tell you that I did see it at Borders. We were talking about it, and it is a sinking line you're talking about there. They do have, I think that's in All Might made by P-Line or somebody. But Berkeley has one called Forward, which is a sinking line. But I will tell you that All Might line, the craziest thing about that line is it is uber thin. When I'm talking about uber thin, I mean uber thin. Like, it only comes in a couple pound tests and diameters, but like the 8-pound test or 10-pound test, whatever it is, when you look at it, it has like a diameter of like 2-pound monofilament. It is so thin, dude. And I don't have bad eyes. Like, my eyes are probably going bad now. I'm 41 years old, but when I look at that line, it is so thin. It looks like a hair. It looks like a human hair. It's so thin. So I'm sure that's why it sinks, but I've never personally used it, so I couldn't tell you if it's junk or not. But it comes in like pink, which I think is pretty crazy. But I've never personally used it. You're right, Jamie. It is actually made by Sunline. You are correct. I've never used it. It is expensive. Stuff's like $35 a spool. Yep, I agree with that. Frogs, and for spinning reels. You're right. We'll talk about that in just a second. Yeah, there it is. He said he bought the 18. It's like 4-pound mono. That is absolutely insane, man. Uh, that is 4-pound monofilament. It is so thin. Like, I'm not kidding. And like the spool is like this big, and it's real thin, just like a normal like spinning around like a just standard spool. But man, it is so crazy how thin that stuff is. Recommendations for Yatesville this weekend. Crazy weather coming in. Man, I'm not going to pull any punches for you here. I would like to fish with you guys, but if I was going to be out there, I'd be throwing a spinnerbait and chatterbait. That's what Jared and I caught them good on the other day. They didn't eat the second day for that spring banger. We had 11 and a half pounds. Should have had 15 pounds plus. Couldn't get them in the boat. But we were catching them on a spinnerbait and a chatterbait, white with chartreuse. I was throwing a willow leaf blade spinnerbait that I make, and I think Jared was throwing a Jack's Custom Jigs from out there in Blaine around Louisa. Most people know Jack, but he had one of his, I think, 3/8 ounce chatterbaits, and we caught 4 fish. Got several fish before keepers. If I was going to go out there this weekend, that's what I'd be doing. Sorry, man. There's a chance I'm gonna be out there fishing, so just throw the spinnerbait in a. Sand branch would probably work. I would be around some timber for sure. Let's see here. Again, more expensive than mono, obviously. Has some memory issues leading to coils and line management problems. I personally have not dealt with that with Sunline, but I've read some places where some mono or some fluorocarbons does have a lot of memory to it. Now, again, guys, there are ways around this, keeping it out of the sun, keeping it in your rod box when you're not using those rods, making sure that you're changing your line not 5 years like I do, and making sure that they actually make sprays for it. I've never tried one. I need to do like maybe one that maybe this year with that Sunline that's just like a slinky. Maybe I'll buy some of that line conditioner and see if it actually fixes it. I don't imagine it would fix your fluorocarbon just for the fact that it's less porous and there's no way for that stuff to sink into the line. However, monofilament being porous or more porous and having that ability to absorb things probably has an effect on it. Best uses for fluorocarbon. I like drop shot, wacky rigs, Ned rigs, something that's really finessey, fishing super clear water. The biggest thing that I use it for, not only for most of my rods, is a leader material for braid. I do that to combine invisibility with strength of the braid, and visibility of the leader material. But some of the things that you're going to work looking at there is the fact that you are going to have to be more mindful of the knots that you tie to transition from the braid to the fluorocarbon. Now, as Jamie was talking about a second ago, I could imagine what kind of knot you have to tie on that Sunline All Might, because it is, you just have to get your eyes on it, guys. It is so thin. It is so crazy that you're probably going to have a hard time getting. It seems like you'd have to tie like 2-pound fluorocarbon to it to get it to stay on a knot. Because if you tie like 10-pound or 8-pound, which is what I normally use, Sunline FC Sniper, the diameter of that is going to be bigger than that braid that you're using, which causes some effect in trying to get those knots to hold on there. And so that's something that you're going to have to dive into there as well. One of the things that I like using fluorocarbon for is deep diving crankbaits and jigs. First off, it sinks faster, helps them reach deeper depths, but there are fluorocarbons that are out there that are designed specifically for cranking. Like, for example, I think it's Sunline FC or Crank FC, I think is what it's called. And it is designed for crankbaits. It's actually designed with a little more stretch in the line. It's not near as much stretch as monofilament, but it does give you that little bit of shock absorption that you need to not break those fish off when you're casting a crankbait, when you're casting a lipless crankbait, chatterbait, something like that. Those might be good things to look at that Crank FC from Sunline. And again, I'm speaking specifically with Sunline because that's what I use, and that's all I can tell you about it. There are many different lines out there that work great. You just have to find out what you like throwing and what works best for you, and basically what you can afford. Sunline is not cheap. Again, I'm very thankful that I have the ability to buy bulk, which helps me out. And that's another thing that I'll talk about is that the Moore line, especially the Sunline, that's one thing I looked at when we bought it. Brad looked at the price, and the amount of difference of the price is crazy when it comes to if you buy it in bulk, how much money you actually save. I'm going to see if I can find an actual price for 1,200 yards full. Let's see here. 12-pound FC Sniper fluorocarbon. This is on Discount Tackle. Looks to me like it's $129. Plus you're gonna have shipping in that, so you're gonna be looking probably 139 bucks. But that's 1,200 yards full. If you think about 28 bucks for 220 yards, that's going to be 6 of those. So you're saving yourself about $30 or $40 by buying it in bulk, which is huge. Hey Andy, what's up, buddy? So knots that I use personally, if I go from braid to fluoro, it's 100% a uni to uni for me. One thing that I've noticed recently, because I've recently stepped down from, I used to throw 10-pound leader fluorocarbon FC Sniper all the time. I had Gene Jensen on my show a couple years ago. He's been on here several times. You guys might know him as Fluke Master. And he's like, step down to 8-pound test on that. And he's like, I guarantee you'll catch more fish. And he was not wrong. That 8-pound test, 8 to 10-pound test has caused me to catch more than double the fish, it seems like, than I was before. Unity. But one of the things I've talked about, or that I was just talking about, is that I've seen my knot break at that. I've seen my line break at that knot a lot. Now, I will tell you, I personally, knock on wood, can't remember a time where I've broken a fish off at the knot. But if I get hooked, like for example, if I'm out in the timber at Gatesville and I'm live scoping and I'm throwing a sonar minnow around some trees and I get hung up, 9 times out of 10, that line will break at the knot of the Unity. As you're talking about the Albright knot there, that is an awesome knot. It's a pain in the rear end to tie, it seems like. I was using the blood knot for a while and the FG knot. The FG knot, it feels like you have to stand on your head, wiggle one toe, and then call somebody you haven't talked to since high school to get it tied. But I do think the FG knot is probably the strongest knot. And one of the downfalls of using NRX rods a lot of the times is that folks have this, opinion all the time. Ask me how I know, because I see it on my videos all the time. Is they have guides on them called recoil guides, and they're made out of titanium, and it's basically just a spiral of wire that is the guide. Well, if you cast a big knot through them, you can hear it going through the guides. Not a deal breaker for me, because those recoil guides, you can actually bend them down all the way to the blank of the fishing rod and release them, and they spring back up. They're made out of spring titanium, which is, I don't know how many times I've stepped on my rods or seen people step on rods and bend the guides down. These will spring back up. Yep, double uni for me. So that's the deal, Andy. Like, I don't think that I've ever had a fish break it off at the knot when I set the hook. It's usually stuck somewhere, and when I'm intentionally breaking my line, like I'm pulling on it to break my line from a snag where I can't get there to it, and it usually breaks at that knot. But I personally have never done that on a hook set that I know of, and it probably has happened. I just don't know. Alberto knot. I've tied that a couple times, but not enough to say anything about or how to tie it. One of the things that I am very adamant about when I'm creating these knots is that if you look up how to make a uni knot, most people will tell you to make 3 loops around the line and then do that on the other side and pull them together so the knots are butted up like this. I do a minimum of 5 loops. And then I make sure that I got that the line uber wet. Like I dunk it in the water while I'm pulling my knots together. That gives me some lubrication. and make sure that there's no friction on there. Even if you just wet it with saliva, I feel like there could be some dry spots. I put it underwater, cinch it up when I can, and that gives me 100% lubrication on the line. And in my opinion, kind of keeps that burning of the line via friction. Yep, Andy, you're 100% correct. I think some people call it the string knot, but I tie 100%. If I'm tying to a bait, it is the improved clinch knot. And I have tied the double San Diego jam knot several times. I really like it, especially for bottom contact bait, something like a jig or something that's big. Like if I'm throwing a big glide bait, I always throw a double San Diego jam knot. There's basically two strands of the line that has to break before your line will break at that knot, which is just kind of extra, security, I guess. And I have videos about those knots out on my channel as well. Now, diving into what I feel like is the workhorse of all fishing line that I use, and that's going to be braided fishing line. It's made from multiple woven strands of synthetic fibers. So there's really two main synthetic fibers out on the planet that these fishing line companies use. One of them is Spectra. The other one is Dyneema or Dyneema. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Spectra is actually a product of Honeywell. And there are some Spectra fibers that are used in like suture material for, like, if JR was on here, he'd be able to speak to that. Like if you get stitches, it's made of a really high quality Spectra fiber. Now, there are not, there's so much that goes into braided fishing line. When I was doing this, one of the things that I really thought about when I was trying to learn which for myself fishing line works the best, basically, is that when I started diving into these different types of braided fishing lines, there is so much data out there that I didn't even know existed. For example, one of the things that if we look at, say, this right here, this is nothing more than it's just kind of an exploded view of a braided fishing line. Now you see that this one actually has different collars in it, and some of them do. Like, for example, again, Power Pro is my go-to braid. There's a billion different braid companies out there. I think Fireline practically was like one of the first ones, which I think was made by Berkeley. There was way more, they've been out forever, but Fireline was like the first thing that came out and that I know of. There was probably more, but the first thing that I used was the Berkeley Fireline. And then now I've stepped up to using Power Pro again, just for the simple fact that I have the ability to say that they're a partner of my YouTube channel. A lot of people don't know this, but obviously you guys know that Shimano owns Shimano, obviously, and G Loomis. Those are subsidiaries of, you have Shimano and then you have G Loomis, which is a subsidiary. They bought it from Gary Loomis like 25 years ago. So if you've bought a G Loomis rod in those times, it's been owned by Shimano. Still have the same warranties usually, depending on everything else. As everything else goes, it's changed a little bit over the years. But they are actually suppliers or, I guess, distributors of Jackal and Power Pro. So they're not Shimano products, but if you're getting this stuff in the United States, they are distributed by Shimano. So that's why you see those two brands based kind of commingled in with the Shimano name. They're not an actual Shimano product. They're just distributed by Shimano. So they're their own products, their own companies, but Shimano just has a lot more, reach. They can get the stuff shipped out a little better. So that's why you see it. But this right here is a depiction of a Spectra braided line. And Spectra, again, is nothing more than a fibrous material made by Honeywell, especially if you're talking about the Spectra fiber, Dyneema. I don't know who makes that, but it's made a lot of. So if we look at, let me pull up another picture here and look at some. So if you look here, just kind of which line to choose spreadsheet here, if you will. Let's get rid of these banners so we can look at this a little bit better. So you have monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braided line, but this is not the right picture that I was going to show you. What I wanted to show you was the there was it listed all of the different popular braids, and over half of them, probably 3/4 of them, are made with Spectra fiber, and the other one was that Dyneema. I'm not sure who makes that fiber, but I would say it's probably roughly the same. Matter of fact, the Spectra fibers go into like Kevlar and bulletproof materials, which is something I looked at, which is pretty crazy. But again, you can see there, each one of these little strands is going to be a strand of Spectra or Dyneema braid that gets braided together to make this line. Now, not all braids are the same. Now, if you look at these two braids right here, they look fairly similar. On the left-hand side, the blue line there, you have what's known as 8 carrier braid, which we'll talk about in just a second. And on the right-hand side, the lime green, you have what's known as 4 carrier braid. Now, what does that mean? Well, first off, a carrier is what the braid fibers, like the Spectra, the Dyneema, what it comes on. So all those little spools there that you see that have that white material on them, or that clear material, is a carrier. Now, 4 versus 8, pretty self-explanatory there. If you have 8 carrier braids, and you have 8 spools being woven together, and if you have 4 carrier braid, you have 4 spools being, or 4 carriers being woven together. Now, if we go back and look at this right here, this picture that I just showed up a second ago, the left-hand side, you can tell pretty much by just looking at this thing that the left hand, the blue line there, is a lot more smooth. I like to think about this as different tires, right? If you have a highway tire versus a mud tire, if you have a highway tire, it's going to be a lot smoother. It's going to be, it's going to be a very smooth ride. It's going to go through your guides a lot better. It's going to not feel as rough in your reel. It's just going to be a nice all-around tire. Well, it doesn't do that well in four-wheel drive mode, right? If you need to go off-road, you're going to want something that has a 4 carrier braid, something like just a standard Power Pro, or I think the Max Quattro has a 4 carrier braid. But it's like a mud tire, man. It gets you in there. If you're pitching and flipping around stumps and stick-ups and rocks and things like that, you may want to, look at that 4 carrier braid versus an 8 carrier braid, due to the fact that the 4 carrier braid has more abrasion resistance than an 8 carrier braid. Now, I don't know why that is. That science is way above my head. It seems like if there was more fibers and it was more smooth, it would be less susceptible to this stuff. But apparently that is not true. What's up, Strick? How you doing, buddy? And you're right on that right there, man. The four strand, or the 4 carrier, does cut through grass better. Again, it goes to that mud tire effect that I was just talking about. Again, so if we dive into looking at this last thing here, I want to show you guys before we hop off here. We're at that hour mark already, which is crazy. Just a little bit of an idea here. So if you're just watching this later and you want to, take a look at this, or screenshot this, or whatever you want to do, just has it basically which line to choose: monofilament, fluorocarbon, braided line. So again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through all of this stuff, but the deal is, the biggest thing that I could teach you about this line today is that monofilament works great pretty much in all conditions. It's cheaper, has way more stretch in it, not great for stuff that's going to be a lot of things in like timber and stuff that has a lot of abrasion capabilities. Great for top water. Again, cheap, works well, does have pros and cons, just like any line. Fluorocarbon, in my opinion, super, super expensive. Depending on what you get, it is really expensive. It's triple, if not 5 times as expensive as monofilament. Less stretch, has more sensitivity, in my opinion, is more invisible in the water, depending on the size you're using. And bad part about it is stiff. You have to make sure you're getting your line and your knots tied correctly using a lot of lubrication, whether that be saliva or lake water, getting those things tied up. And braided line, again, we kind of skipped a little bit about braid there, but braid, in my opinion, is going to be one of those deals where it's kind of your all-around rod. Somebody mentioned, I think it was El Rey earlier, that the frogs, top water, I throw top water pretty much on 100% of my top water rods. Now, as Worm Leap mentioned earlier, it doesn't lend itself well for somebody like myself that has a itchy trigger finger. If I catch a fish, if I hear a fish blow up on a top water bait, man, a lot of times I jerk that thing out of that fish's face and maybe I should go back to using Shimano just to keep that from happening. Let me pop something here open real quick. Again, back to braid. It floats, makes it great for top water, heavy cover applications, 4-carrier if it's going to be really heavy applications. 90% of the time I'm using an 8-carrier braid, guys. My favorite braid on the planet is Power Pro Super V Slick or Super 8 Slick V2, which is an 8-carrier braid. I will tell you that Power Pro does fade. I know that P-Line has something that's it's a zero fade line, which I think is pretty cool. And if they're using Spectra braid, Spectra fibers, probably not going to be much different than the than Power Pro. But I trust Power Pro again with that because I use most of the time 10-pound test on my spinning rods. I've been known to throw 30-pound test braid on my spinning rods, and I had some dude on YouTube call me out on that. I was doing a review on an 852S NRX Plus, and he said, "You lost me at 30-pound braid." I said, "Well, I might have, but Super Slick V2 from Power Pro, it has a diameter of 0.011 inches, so 11 thousandths of an inch. That's like 6-pound monofilament. So at 30 pounds, which is crazy. So I think people aren't making that connection." Andy, I'm glad you mentioned this because let me get rid of this banner right here. Get rid of this photo. Really quick tip for you. Personally, man, I think you can get multiple years out of braid. I'm talking like 3 to 5 years easy. But here's a tip for you that I guarantee you can get at least 3 years out of it. When you reel a spool of line on a spinning rod or a bait casting reel, the biggest thing about braid is that you must use a backer. You buy some cheap monofilament, reel maybe 10, 15 yards of that line on your spool, enough to coat the entire bottom of the spool, and then tie your braid on that. If you do not do that, I don't care how tight you get that knot with that braid attaching it to that spool, it will eventually loosen up and you will get the braid of your line spool, or the braided line spinning around the spool. You will feel like your drag is totally loose, even if you have it totally cranked down, because there's nothing for that braid to bite to on that aluminum spool. Always use backer, tie it on with the uni or whatever you want, and then fill the spool. And then if you're using a braid or a braid to fluorocarbon leader, use the knot that you trust there too. But the tip is that after you use a line for a certain amount of time, like especially Sunline FC Sniper, the Power Pro, Super V Slick or Super 2, gee whiz, Super Slick. It's weird how it's worded. It's like Super 8 Slick version 2, V2. That's it. They have something called Moonshine, which is basically developed for black lights, but I like it because it's super high vis yellow. It does fade over time. Matter of fact, it will fade within a year of using it because of the sun beating down on it, water hitting, etc. It does not last forever. That's one of the downfalls about Power Pro that I'll tell you right off the rip. The most other stuff like their onyx and their green and their the moss green and the blue, it doesn't fade that bad, but the Moonshine fades terribly. And it's probably just for the simple fact that it's based for night fishing. So it probably doesn't have like a UV inhibitor on there because, let's face it, the sun's not out at night when you're fishing during night fishing. But once you get done using that spool of line on, let's just say that you spool it up on a spinning rod. Well, I don't care how far or how big of a dude you are, you're not casting that entire spool off at any given time. Matter of fact, you're probably not even going halfway down in the spool. So the tip is, when you're wanting to replace a braided line on a reel, take that braided line and put it over on another reel of yours, tie it to the backer of that reel, and reel the line from one rod onto the other. So all that used line, which is the front half on one rod, becomes the back half on the second rod, and you get that nice new non-faded braid that doesn't have any abrasion or any frays or anything like that on that. So you're getting 2 full uses out of one spool's worth of braid. I change braid like crazy because I buy it in 3,000 yard spools from Shimano. So I have the ability to do so. I don't change it every day. I don't change it every week. I don't change it every month. I change it 2 or 3 times a year, just for the simple fact that I have the availability. I think you can get multiple years out of it, even not doing what I'm talking about. I would feel happy and be okay with using a braided line, especially the Power Pro. I can speak personally, 3+ years without any problem. All right, ladies and gents, that's the rundown of some fishing line. And I hope that helps you out. And if it does, great. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, I'd appreciate it. I'm on the hunt for 6,000 subscribers. Next week, you're going to see the Casting for Kids tournament. Week after that is the trip. Myself and Dusty are headed out west. Going to be a cowboy sucker. Not really. We're going to go out and try to catch the fish. Going to Arkansas and Missouri. Going to Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana. Aaron, if you're still on here, tell me where to stay at Caney Creek. I can't find anywhere to stay. Like, there's one campground, and it is jam-packed. I'm thinking about driving to Bussy Break and fishing there because I can't find any place to stay. There's a town like 30 miles away that has a ton of hotels, which I'm okay with, but I really don't have to drive 30 miles each way to get to the lake. Maybe that's it. Tyler, I'll see you, I'm sure, probably before then, but if not, I will see you there in 2 weeks. Shout out to the sponsors, again, of this show. I cannot say enough about that. First and foremost, Hannah Sublett, insurance broker. Give her a call. Again, I'll throw her number up here on the screen one more time. Life or health insurance. She's in Greenup, Kentucky. She can sell Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, I think. 740-456-7944. And shout out to Malone's Marine. He does so much for me and JR. Again, he's fixing JR's boat. I think, matter of fact, he may have it this week. Putting a brand new axle underneath that thing due to a warranty claim on, obviously it wasn't just for him. It was through Phoenix, but he's getting him fixed up. Hopefully we'll get it. I'm sure we'll have it back for Casting for Kids, so that's going to be great. Borders, obviously. Solar Bat sunglasses. If they're running some great deals right now, guys, I think it's 30% off on the entire store. Solarbat.com. You don't need a promo at all. But I think if you use the promo code Waller, it'll save you pretty much the shipping, which is great. Again, can't say enough about Shimano and G Loomis. They're out there for me all the time. I get to fish what I think is the best, and I get to fish it at a price point where even a high school teacher could afford it. So I appreciate that very, very much. That being said, guys, I hope you guys get out there and lean on this weekend, and I hope I see you guys on the water. We'll see you next time on Another Line.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of On Another Line Live. We truly appreciate your support, and we couldn't do it without all the amazing folks at home watching week after week. A big thank you goes out to our sponsors, who help make this show possible. Malone's Marine, Borders Sporting Goods, Solar Bat Sunglasses, Picasso Lures, Shimano, and Columbia Sportswear. Their partnership allows us to keep bringing you the content you love. We'll see you next time on Another Line. Until then, get out there and lean on them.